Join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll be getting into everything that has got you talking today. Now, let me tell you what's been on my mind today. I don't know about you, but I am filled with horror at the moment at the ease in which we're suddenly turning against a whole segment of our own society, simply for making a personal medical choice. I speak, of course, of the unvaccinated. Everyday animosity towards the group seems to ramp up a notch, and I, for one, think that it is dangerous and wrong. I'll be discussing that and, importantly, looking at some actual facts surrounding this debate. And another topic that caught my eye today, it now costs £430 million per year to provide housing and payments to people who have claimed asylum in the UK and are waiting for their applications to be processed. How much more evidence do we need that the system is broken? And junk food. Campaigners are once again calling for there to be cigarette-style warning labels on the packaging. Previously, I'll admit, I did think this was a little bit of a nanny state gone mad. But now, we've got to be realistic, because given how many folk are actually obese, I now think this surely is just basic common sense. Am I wrong? Well, we'll have all that to come and more, but first, let's have a look at the latest news headlines.
Michelle, thank you. I'm Polly Middlehurst with your news at 6 o'clock. The number of confirmed daily COVID-19 cases in the UK has reached 6 figures for the first time since the start of the pandemic. Government data shows 106,122 lab-confirmed cases have been recorded in the UK in the last 24 hours. 140 people have died within 28 days of testing positive in the same period of time. Separate figures published by the Office for National Statistics show since the start of the pandemic there have been 173,000 deaths in the UK, where COVID-19 was mentioned on the death certificate. The First Minister of Wales has announced that the country will move to COVID Alert 2 on Boxing Day. The measures include 2-metre social distancing in public and at places of work. The rule of 6 is being brought back into pubs, restaurants, cinemas and theatres. Face coverings will need to be worn in hospitality settings if you're moving around, and there will be a limit on the number of people attending events, with 30 people allowed for indoor events and 50 for outdoors. Similarly, Northern Ireland is going to be closing nightclubs from 8 p.m. on Boxing Day. The public will be urged, but not mandated, to stick to the 3 households indoors rule. Ministers are also agreeing that sporting events can continue with no limits on capacity, while social distancing will be implemented in the workplace. It comes on the same day that the region recorded its highest daily increase in cases of the virus as well. Well, a new version of the Pfizer COVID jab has been approved for use in children in the UK. The Medicines and Healthcare Agency gave the green light to the jab for 5 to 11-year-olds who are at risk or in contact with those who are vulnerable. Further advice regarding vaccine for other children is expected in due course. The Welsh Health Minister said it will implement a rollout of COVID vaccines for at-risk children early next year. The UK's chief medical officers have praised NHS staff for their tireless work during the pandemic, but they're warning of tougher winter months ahead. They're urging staff to prepare for multiple challenges as hospital admissions with the Omicron variant are now rising very rapidly. The chief executive of King's College Hospital in London also says they're concerned at the number of COVID-related staff shortages. Away from COVID, police investigating the disappearance of a man in London have begun searching the River Thames. 20-year-old Harvey Parker was last seen leaving a nightclub in the early hours of Friday morning. Following a search of local CCTV in central London, police say they're now concerned he may have entered the water. The UK economy now, and it's grown at a much slower pace than first thought between July and September of this year. The Office for National Statistics said the economy expanded by 1.1% in the third quarter of this year. That's compared with an initial estimate of 1.3%. Experts think it will shrink further in December as new COVID restrictions may be introduced. A deputy head teacher has been jailed for 13 years and 4 months at Liverpool Crown Court for child sex abuse offences, including 2 accounts of rape. Julie Morris admitted filming herself and her partner, David, raping a girl under the age of 13. The 44-year-old had been the safeguarding lead at her school in Wigan in Greater Manchester. The offences do not relate to her employment, but it's understood Morris sent photographs of pupils at her school to her partner. A government minister in Madagascar has said he had to swim for 12 hours after his helicopter crashed at sea during a rescue attempt. Serge Geller, who leads the National Gendarmerie, was with a team searching the northeastern coast of the country after a cargo ship illegally carrying 138 passengers sank. At least 83 people died in the incident. 24 people are still missing. 50 survivors, though, have been found. You're up to date. Now let's get back to Michelle with Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, keeping me company for the rest of the show is my panel. Michael Heaver, political commentator and former member of the European Parliament. Ella Whelan, who's a journalist, and Nabila Ramdani, who's a journalist and broadcaster. Good evening to all of you. And you know the drill by now. It's not just about us. It is also about you at home and your thoughts. What is it that's on your mind tonight? What has got you talking? You can email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews. Now, let's start the show with me. You know, this is a concern that I voice often, not going to lie. If you watch this programme, you'll know my thoughts on this. This is, and I feel, a little bit like a stuck record. But we seem to be getting worse. Hence, I want to focus on it again. What am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about the massive division that is being created in society, the us against them mentality. I mean, we've only just pretty much, and I say pretty much, but we've only just about recovered from the Brexit division, didn't we? Do you remember, if you was a Brexiteer, some of your friends pretty much hated you at times, and likewise, if you was a Remainer and your friend was a Brexiteer, you know what I'm talking about, I'm sure. Well, we seem to be sleepwalking our way back into the same situation, if not worse. The microscopic focus on the unvaccinated is really getting quite intense. Everyone's at it. Sajid Javid was talking about this week that the unvaccinated are damaging society. You've had the Archbishop Justin Welby. He's been getting in touch when asked, sorry, not in touch, he's not contacted me, got to be honest, but he's been getting involved. When he was asked, is it immoral not to be vaccinated if you can be? He's pretty much saying, yes, it is, because you're supposed to be loving thy neighbour. Even Tony Blair has gotten involved.
Frankly, if you're not vaccinated at the moment and you're eligible and you've got no health reason for not being vaccinated, you're not just irresponsible. I mean, you're an idiot.
Yeah, see, and I mean, just an even brief look at any form of social media at the moment will show you what the temperature and the sentiment is like at the moment. The unvaccinated are called selfish, moronic. There's conversations about whether or not they should be locked down, whether or not they should even be given NHS treatment. Honestly, I read an article as well just a couple of days ago, basically talking about how you can deal with the unvaccinated in your family at Christmas. This whole article giving pointers, basically, about what you should do if one of your family are unvaccinated. I personally find this a very worrying trend, very dangerous sentiment to try and pit people against each other. And before we get into this debate with my panel, I just want to have a look at some of the numbers, because I think one of the challenges at the moment is all these people are kind of throwing numbers around and people are not really sure what is actually going on. So joining me now to look at some of the latest statistics, I'm pleased to welcome Jamie Jenkins, who's the former head of health statistics at the ONS, the Office for National Statistics. Good evening to you, Jamie. Can I just start by looking at the picture in the hospitals? We're constantly told that the pictures are overrun, that the hospitals are overrun, and any time that we're considering, for example, lockdowns, it's all centred around protecting the NHS. So what is going on in hospitals right now?
Yeah, so if we actually look at the facts and figures, we're nowhere near where we were this time last year. We've got around 5% of kind of beds in the NHS, the general and acute beds, are filled by COVID patients, and that's similar across the different nations. And it does kind of vary because the peaks of the different waves in different parts of the country were slightly different last year. So in England, the number of COVID patients about 60% lower. In Wales, it's actually 83% lower. And in Scotland, it's 50% lower. And for Wales and Scotland, the number of COVID patients is actually at a 3-month low. If we look at the picture then just for specifically critical care beds, where you kind of need more of that intense treatment, we know within England that about 1 in 5 COVID patients, 1 in 5 critical care beds have got a COVID patient in them, 3 in 5 have non-COVID patients, and about 1 in 5 of the critical care beds are unoccupied. So that's the general flavour. About 5% overall of beds. Critical care is about 1 in 5. But the narrative, obviously, across all of the general news that you start hearing is kind of the NHS overrun with COVID patients. It's predominantly non-COVID patients that make up the majority of people in hospital.
Yeah, and then if I may, what is the kind of split here of the vaccination versus the unvaccinated, etc., when it comes to hospitalisations?
So what we do, Michelle, we get information each week from the UK Health Agency where they kind of break down the vaccination status of people who are admitted to hospital with COVID. Now, remember, about 1 in 4 patients who are admitted to hospital with COVID are actually in hospital with COVID, but they're not actually being treated predominantly for COVID, because obviously when COVID is spreading across the community, people will have that. And if we use the information that they've got, the most recent estimates would say that about 43% of the admissions with COVID for the last 4 weeks in England, for example, is people who are unvaccinated. And then we've also had a study recently done where they've linked the NHS number to the intensive care kind of units, and the researchers are on there, which says about 48% of patients who are in intensive care, the more serious care, are unvaccinated. And obviously we've been hearing ministers, lots of newspapers talk about 9 in 10 unvaccinated. That's using a very small proportion of the kind of the population, which is a bit disingenuous when they're reporting it. So the majority of patients who are in hospital are vaccinated, but remember, the majority of people in the population are vaccinated. So it's not surprising. And the stats do show that if you are unvaccinated, if you compare 2 individuals, one who's got similar characteristics to another, that you're at a higher risk of admission if you are unvaccinated. But that's not the full story. There are other factors as well. We know that if people are obese, about half of the patients who are obese in intensive care. And interestingly as well is that if we look at severely obese, and this is using the NHS's own guidelines in terms of how you describe these, you've got over 4 times as many patients in intensive care as what you would expect if obesity had no impact on COVID admissions.
Yeah, and in terms of, because one of the things, Jamie, that we're always being told, and particularly in this conversation, I think that there is a real kind of sentiment that if you're not vaccinated, you are, deeply selfish because you're exposing yourselves to a greater risk of catching COVID and therefore transmitting COVID. Do we have any data around that?
Well, there's obviously the unvaccinated are put into kind of one big bucket at the moment. I've had 2 doses of a COVID vaccine. I've recently had COVID, and the Office for National Statistics, what they've done is looked at kind of the relative risk of catching COVID for different groups. And what we can see is that if you've had 3 doses, you've had your booster, you've had 3 doses of a COVID vaccine, if you compare those people versus somebody who's unvaccinated, there's an 80% reduction in the chance of you testing positive. And obviously, if you don't test positive, you're not going to transmit that on. But interestingly as well, if we start looking at people who've had a previous infection, so they've had COVID, and versus somebody who's never had COVID, there's a similar reduction in the chance of you catching it as well. So there will be many people who are unvaccinated who may have taken the decision not to have a vaccine because they've had COVID previously. And the facts and figures suggest they've got a similar level of not catching COVID as somebody who is kind of vaccinated as well. So I think, when you're talking about the unvaccinated population, Michelle, you remember there's a large range of different people within there.
OK, Jamie Jenkins, thank you very much for that. Ella Whelan, I'm interested in your thoughts. I wanted to get someone on to kind of start the conversation explaining the stats because I do worry, and I have this conversation all the time, and there seems to be a lot of confusion, I think, between a lot of people. There's such a big sentiment at the moment that the unvaccinated people are overrunning the hospitals. There's then a big sentiment that actually all of the hospitals are so overwhelmed, and that's why we have to start considering lockdowns. And I'm really quite uncomfortable with the direction that the kind of conversation is taking, because I don't think anyone should be demonised for making a personal medical choice.
No, I don't think people should be demonised, and we see across Europe different countries taking some very authoritarian measures, whether it be specific lockdowns for the unvaccinated or lockdowns because people aren't unvaccinated. There's a particular level of demonisation around the unvaccinated. On the other hand, I think in the UK, the picture is slightly different because most people have willingly got the vaccine. Most people are quite positive, like I am, very positive about the vaccine, excited about this medical innovation that's come about, particularly in relation to AstraZeneca, excited that we were led the way in that politically, but also, excited about the fact that if you get the booster, as I have done, and many people have done now at this point, you are, as Jamie just said, 80% protected. It means that you're less likely to not just catch it, but also less likely to pass it on. And I think most people are quite positive about that. The small section of society who are still, as Jamie, if you're using the figures that were just mentioned, 48% of people who are unvaccinated ending up in intensive care. I think I care about that, and I think people should care about that. So rather than demonisation, I propose that we use a kind of healthy amount of social pressure, which means talking about the fact of what happens if you are unvaccinated, talking about the risks, trying to persuade people in a friendly and open and not a kind of terrorising manner of why they should get vaccinated. I mean, I'm a volunteer vaccinator and I'm constantly talking to people about it, about why I think they should. Now, if they said, no, I don't want to, leave me alone, would I press them? No, because you act like a decent person. But if I was to kind of flip it of what the concern that you have, the concern that I have is that the vaccination status is becoming this kind of political football that is bringing out, I think, the worst out of both sides, because we know that our response to this pandemic is not purely an isolated individual approach. This isn't just about a one-man island. We are all connected in relation to our response to this vaccine, but we can do that without going down the illiberal, authoritarian, mandated, coercive route.
Nabila.
Yes, well, I guess the crux of the matter here is that someone's freedom to avoid vaccination is of huge risk to other members of society. But I think if you want to take very strict precautions to try to avoid infection, you still can do that. And in the end, in my view, is that it's all about tolerance and structuring your life as you choose. Just like Ella, I'm a great believer in the progress of medicine. I have great faith in medicine. I think it has improved the lives of millions of people, increased life expectancy massively, and I think maybe it's about time that there was a cultural change about taking medicine. In the end, it's not as much as a big deal, and I think there are, of course, very legitimate concerns about this horrific pandemic, but Britain remains a Western democracy based on liberal values, and I really don't like the way the government it seems to be wanting to stigmatise non-vaccinated people, and this, by definition, in my view, is damaging for society. I mean, let's not forget that the Tory party has always focused on freedoms, including individual freedoms, ironically, the individual freedoms to be very unhealthy, including smoking and drinking to yourself to ill health. And yes, I think I wouldn't personally show prejudice against someone who would choose not to get vaccinated.
Yeah, and Michael, I mean, I'm getting contact emails and tweets coming in, really quickly about this. And Justin says, well, if you don't get vaccinated, Michelle, and you end up in hospital with COVID, then you should receive the bill. And this is something that I hear frequently, and it's something that I personally wholly disagree with.
Yeah, look, I think people are not going to be, those who haven't had the vaccine yet, are not going to be bullied into it. I think Tony Blair's intervention there is completely counterproductive because people may actually end up digging their heels in if you just throw insults at them. I think what we also need to consider is the fact that when we look at the vaccine now, originally, obviously, people were told to get 2, now a booster. We now know in Israel, people are actually being urged to have a 4th vaccine. And something that I want to see more debate around is what is the long-term path here? Because if, say, and we know that the Omicron, it looks like it's more mild as a variant, what are we going to do this time next year if another variant pops up, for instance? What is the likelihood of that? Because from what I'm seeing and what I've been reading, the likelihood of us seeing variants spring up right across the world over the medium to long term is quite likely. And so in that case, are we going to be looking at a society where we have a government consistently looking at what liberties they're going to take away and give back to us? Are people going to realistically need to go and get a 1 booster a year in perpetuity, 2 or 3 moving forward? And this, in terms of the long-term outlook of this, I think is something the government needs to be honest about, because if they're honest about what this is likely to look like over the coming months and years, then I think people will be more trusting. But I certainly don't want to live in a country where we're constantly under the threat every Christmas of what restrictions are we looking at this year.
Well, yeah, and I mean, one thing that I've always been really quite strict on is I don't discuss my vaccination status publicly. I've always said from day one, it's nobody's business what's gone into my body except my own. And if I ever need any treatment for anything, then of course the medical professional that's helping me needs to know my situation. I've always felt, and I now feel actually that I was right to feel this way, that what's happening is it's almost going to become a position of virtue. Because yeah, okay, you have your vaccine, then you have your second one, then you're in a position, a lot of people are now in a position where it's like, well, shall I have my 3rd one? Shan't I have my 3rd one? I'm not really sure what to do. So then some people will choose to have 3, some people won't. And then it's all about talking about places like Israel, your 4th. And I think that it just makes me uneasy. I've never known a scenario where people almost demand to know, what have you had? When have you had it? Which one did you have? What are you going to do about your 3rd? What about this? What about that? I honestly, well, I do, I say it on here all the time, it's nobody's business. And I worry, Ella, that we're going to get to a point where it's like, it is almost like a point of virtue. You see it, I see it on people's Instagram, the profiles. I'm vaxxed, I've got Pfizer in my veins, I've got 3 shots, I'm boosted. I think it's a bit weird.
I don't know that I think there's anything wrong with it. I think I probably put up an Instagram picture saying that I was boosted.
Well, why?
Just because I think that, well, I just did it because I like putting up pictures of myself and a bit vain, but no reason more serious than that. But I think most people understand on a more serious political note that we are in a unique moment. Okay, it's not an emergency anymore, and the problem that the government has is that it's enjoying extending the idea that we're in an emergency because it's easier for the government to not give back our freedom. I mean, the Irish Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, I think the other day said, oh, well, we need to start giving people a little bit of freedom or they're going to get antsy, as if it's just this thing that governments can gift to citizens. It's ridiculous. But in relation to vaccination, we know that, Nabila talked about the kind of wonder of science. We have a problem on our hands over the last 2 years now coming on to. We've got this virus that initially we knew nothing about. We now know a lot more about. That does pose a very serious threat to significant sections of society, not just the unvaccinated, but the elderly and the infirm. When we know that the government was slow to off the mark to roll out the booster programme among the elder population. So we know that it still poses a relative threat. There are still quite large amounts of people dying, by the way, every day. So this isn't over yet, but it's not an emergency, but it's not over yet. And I think a lot of people are proud of the fact that we have, as a civilised society, come up with a solution in the form of a vaccine. I think it should be a positive thing. I think it's devastating that it has become this negative political football, that it has become this coercive measure. No, it's no one's business what you put into your body in relation to your medical history. But I think that we have lost the positive sense that our fight back against this virus is a social thing, that we all come together to do things, whether it be helping people shield, whether it be volunteering, whether it be going out and get your booster, which I think everyone should, if they want to. It's a very good thing to do to protect yourself and others. Okay. But why does it have to be negative? It could have been a positive thing, and I think the government has squandered that positivity.
Yeah, well, I'm going to take a break, and when I come back, I'm going to read out some of your responses to this. So do let me know what your thoughts are on this. Are you someone who, you think this is great, and you are someone that I'm referring to that does go on your social media and talk about how many of these you've had? Would there ever be a point, though, when you might start going, not sure about this, I'm on my 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, whatever it is? Let me know. I'm intrigued by that kind of mindset. I'm GBViews at GBnews.uk, or you can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBnews. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be looking at the cost for helping asylum seekers. I'll give you a clue. It's almost doubled to £430 million. We'll be looking at that and more after the break.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. A lot of cloud around for this coming night. As a result of this, a little bit less cold than it's been recently, particularly in the south. There is some rain around, and the air's still cold enough, though, for some ice across Scotland as this rain mingles with colder air here. Some snow too for the mountains of northern Scotland. Elsewhere, though, any early evening rain should soon clear away to leave a lot of cloud around. 1 or 2 clear spells for central and eastern England, but a good deal of cloudy grey weather to start Thursday morning. And after an early dip in temperatures across the east, well, those temperatures generally coming up from the west, so not as cold, particularly in the south, compared to last night. So it will be a fairly grey start to Thursday morning. Still some rain across parts of Scotland. This will tend to fizzle out for a time before being boosted by the next weather front coming in from the southwest. So quite a wet day to come for Scotland. Some rain too for Northern Ireland and for Northern England, but rain elsewhere across England and Wales, not really amounting to too much. And as the rain clears, we see some milder air coming into the southwest. So temperatures here, 11, 12, 13 degrees on Thursday afternoon. Still on the chilly side, though, in and to the north of this rain band. And the air certainly cold enough for across Scotland on Thursday night into Christmas Eve morning for some quite significant snowfall across the mountains, so something to bear in mind if you're travelling here. Elsewhere, though, into Christmas Eve morning, the rain will clear through. We're left with clear spells, but a lot of damp ground, so potentially some fog patches forming, but it won't be as cold for most of us as it has been for some recent nights. So Christmas Eve could start quite grey, quite foggy across central southern England. The fog here will take its time to clear on Christmas Eve morning. So again, bear that in mind if you have Christmas travel plans. But the fog will lift from the west as this next band of rain comes in from the west. Some quite heavy rain for parts of southwest England, Wales into Northern Ireland. A drier day for Scotland. Scotland still in the colder air ahead of this weather front. And this sets the scene then as we move into Christmas Day. We've got cold air to the north and east of the UK, milder air trying to push into the south. Where these weather fronts separate the dividing line, well, that's where we've got the greatest chance of seeing snow. So quite an unsettled picture, so certainly some rain around at times, with some quite low temperatures in the north. Here we've got the chance of some snow too.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs and Co. That last topic has certainly got you guys talking. There's quite a mixed response, actually. Many of you agree with me. Many of you completely disagree with me, and that's absolutely fine. I like all different opinions on this show. Dave said, well, sorry, not Dave, sorry, Diane says, I'm 81 on Boxing Day. My husband is 84 in May. I haven't had the vaccine because I had a very bad reaction, she says, to a different type of vaccine previously. And now they feel very upset and feel like pariahs, they say. We're not selfish. We very rarely go out and we now try and stay in. Paul says, I'm double jabbed myself, so therefore I couldn't care less who chooses not to. Lionel says, I cannot understand your sympathy, Michelle, towards the unvaccinated people. They are selfish and they are taking NHS resources away from those requiring care, despite being fully jabbed. Jacqueline says, I am vaccinated, but I struggled after my last one and I don't want any more doses, and I'm worried I'm going to be ostracised because of this. Dawn says, thanks, Michelle, for airing this important and painful subject. Kevin says NHS staff have to be vaccinated forever. People can choose not to work in the health industry and keep their anti-vaxxer credentials if they want. Get over it. John says, well, I would rather be an idiot than be responsible for millions of deaths. And William says, how many jabs do you need before you say enough is enough? See, there you go. I told you. Lots of divided opinions on that one, and do keep them coming in. Let's move on to a different story now. Analysis from Migration Watch UK has found that the price of supporting asylum seekers has doubled in the last 3 years. It now costs £430 million per year to provide housing and payments to people who have claimed asylum in the UK and are waiting for their applications to be processed. Costs are set to rise by another £100 million next year, but dozens of residents are asking to be rehoused because they're saying that the accommodation provided by the Home Office is, I quote, not fit to live in. Goodness me, how much more evidence do we need that the system is broken, Michael?
Well, I think this is, one of the outcomes of the complete chaos we've seen with the government losing control. And obviously, this year, I think we've seen 28,000 people come across from France illegally on small boats to England. That's treble the number we saw in 2020. And 2020 was a quadrupling on the year before that, 2019. So in terms of where we're going on this, the costs are set to escalate even further. I mean, when you look at the figures in this story, we're now projecting 80,000 people, housing and payments, £537 million a year. And unless the government change course on this and get far tougher, we are going to see this dangerous situation, unfortunately, continue to get even worse. Because, of course, we've seen the French authorities, even after being given tens of millions of pounds by the British government, we've seen occasions where the French authorities have sat on the beaches and watched this go on. So I think time has come now that the government say very clearly, anyone who comes to the UK, and by the way, people doing this, coming across on small boats, it should be made absolutely clear they will not be allowed to stay. And the government make clear that this is actually illegal, arrest them, put them on a boat, back to France. The French will go absolutely ballistic, and guess what? We'll actually stop this from escalating even further next year, which on current trajectory is exactly what's going to happen. It's going to get even worse next year.
Do you agree?
Well, I think if a Western liberal democracy runs an asylum system, then it's bound to be extremely expensive. This is especially so when so many people around the world know about it and want to travel to the UK to test it effectively. And this is no different to any other system, including the British justice system, for example, which makes sure that justice is available for as many people as possible. And that, by definition, is costing billions of pounds to the British government. So in that respect, it costs a huge amount of money as well. And it's easy to forget that the technology has advanced in so many ways over the past 2 decades, and there are people from far-flung countries who know about the UK and want to come over here to indeed exploit the system. But there will also be very genuine cases of asylum seekers or people fleeing war or famine, and others who will be very straightforward economic migrants. And I think humanity is primarily, or the world is primarily, driven by economics, and everybody in the end wants a better life for themselves, and they will travel to make it happen effectively.
Yeah, Ella, I mean, Nabila's there saying, if you want to have an asylum system, any country, you're going to have bills attached to that, and that's, of course. But there'll be many people watching this programme, Ella, that think that this is grossly unfair, I guess, on them as taxpayers, that someone can illegally enter a country and essentially be provided with hotels, healthcare, whatever else it is, and legal aid whilst their applications are being processed.
You could look at it that way. You could also understand that many of the people who've been, who are reaching these shores via seeking asylum are coming from places that have been disrupted because of the actions of British governments. I mean, going right back to Blair's moves, when he was in government, right up to what just happened in Afghanistan a few months ago. It's not, these asylum seekers are not dropping out of the sky. They're not poking out of the blue.
No, but they're largely from France.
They originally are coming from places which, due to the decisions taken by Western politicians and the chaos wreaked in Middle Eastern countries and places across the world, that they have created asylum seekers. That is true. What's also true is that, if you look at the numbers, back in 2002, the kind of peak of asylum seekers happened then when it was about 84,000. In 2019, it was only about 36,000, and in 2010, it was about 18,000. So it has dipped a lot in the last kind of 20 years. But the costs of 430 million, it's not like these asylum seekers are living it up in five-star hotels, kind of like, sitting out on the balconies, enjoying the few bits of sun that we get in the UK. Lots of them are living in squalor. Lots of them very deeply want to become citizens. They want to become citizens to be afforded the benefits.
But many of them are put up in very nice hotels, though, Ella. You'd concede that, right?
Not very many of them. In fact, lots of them end up in, either detention centres like Yarlswood, endlessly waiting without any contact or details of their application. The Priti Patel's talking about setting up new things which are called reception areas, which sound like glorified prisons. The system of asylum is brutal and inhumane in many cases. I think, if you want to talk about humane options, we have a labour shortage in the UK. We have lots of things that we need people to do. We have lots of space for people. We can take in a lot more people. I think what's wrong with, rather than longing out asylum, the process of asylum over 2, 3, 4, 5 years, which would cost a huge amount of money, why not make people to citizens much quicker, get them in work, get them afforded the benefits that you have as a citizen in relation to healthcare, but also contributing to society? Why do we have to take such a negative view in relation to this?
It's interesting to mention the labour shortage, because, of course, one of the things myself and many Brexiteers argued was if we left the European Union, we had lower migration, we'd actually see wages for British workers rise, which we're actually now seeing. Now, the bosses call it labour shortage. What you've actually got at the moment is a workers' market. You're seeing companies offer thousands of pound bonuses because they're desperate to get workers in and are having to raise pay and conditions. Now, I actually think that's a good thing. And I think this country should stop operating on a high migration, and I'm talking about in the hundreds of thousands, 200, 300,000 each year, because I think the evidence is already, if you bring net migration down, British workers get paid more because it forces bosses and companies to raise pay, raise conditions, and I think that's a good thing.
As a Brexit voter, equally myself, I understand where you're coming from, but I think setting up a position between British workers and migrant labour is not what I'm going for here. I think that's a pretty reactionary view. But
that's the evidence of what we're seeing now.
But if people become citizens of this country, they become British workers, right? Because if you become a British citizen, you become a British worker, and you're no longer a migrant or an asylum seeker. That's what I'm talking about. Now, the whole question around labour shortages makes me slightly itchy, because I don't like that. It was a particular line, you're right, from lots of Remainers who said, well, who's going to pour our coffees? Who's going to do this? Who's going to pick our fruit? And I'm not interested in treating migrants in that kind of instrumental way. But I think that I think what we have at the moment around a discussion about migration is this fallacy that Britain is this tiny island that can't take any more people in, that there is a opposition between British workers fighting for better wages and migrants undermining that. That has always been a reactionary position of people who want to undermine the sense of class solidarity. And instead, we should look about this a bit more in the round.
But hang on, I'm confused by what you're saying. You're saying there's a fallacy that this is an island. This is an island with finite resources. We've got a situation where schools are overstretched, GP surgeries are overstretched. We're about to have
housing.
Housing. So
that.
But we do have finite resources, services, capacity, and that is just a fact. So why would you say that that's a fallacy?
It's not necessarily a fact. It doesn't have to be a fact. I think we have to get away from this kind of fatalistic outlook of the kind of pretense of scarcity. This is an island that has a huge amount of resources. What we have is a lack of political will. We don't have enough houses because there's not enough bricks. We don't have enough houses because politicians won't put in the resources to build enough houses. Now, I don't think migrants should suffer at the fault of that lack of political will.
And dare I say, if we have a humane asylum system offering accommodation, then it should be clean and efficient. And as it happens, there's plenty of evidence that accommodation being offered to asylum seekers is not fit to live in. And these are people who are not criminals, who have done nothing wrong. There's actually evidence that there are people who suffer from torture, who are being put in crowded situations. These are very vulnerable people who are entitled to decent conditions while waiting for the asylum process. You're going to think this is a really awful point I'm going to make, but crossing a border illegally, I would say that is a criminal act.
You're a criminal.
Well, these are very vulnerable and desperate people who, for most of them, want to come over here to test their cases to seek asylum and to seek a better life, ultimately. And Britain brands itself and indeed prides itself in being,
let me ask you this
humane society.
So you're telling me you think it's inhumane for someone who is illegally entered a country to then be collected by a lifeboat, brought over to shore, put into hotels, given food vouchers, given medical assistance, given legal aid. You're telling me you think that's inhumane?
No, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying this is the debate we're having. If Britain is indeed
Have you seen some of the places these people are
There's
staying
people
in?
that serve this country that are living on the streets that don't even have anything over their head. They're outside.
Why do you have
so why don't we sort our own house in order before we start giving away more houses to people who come into the country illegally?
If you start setting up the idea of there's us and them...
British citizens who have served this country before people who have come into this country illegally is a very sensible thing to do, I think.
The politicians throughout the ages have made the kind of British jobs for British workers, British people first argument. I think it smacks of a kind of reactionary politics that isn't international in its outlook and doesn't cut really to the heart of the matter, which is why can't we all argue for more? I'd put the question to the Tories of saying, why aren't you building more houses for the very small number of us, like relatively speaking, the small number of asylum seekers, but the whole rest of us as well.
To abide by.
We do have, we do. Well, I think actually Ella's there. Ella's final throwaway comment there is get some perspective. Well, I'm interested in you at home. Ella reckons that basically this is a political will, that I'm saying that there's a lack of school places, there's a lack of GPs appointments, there's a lack of capacity pretty much everywhere, quite frankly. Ella says that's political will. I would say it's because actually it is a fact that we have finite resources, whether that's finite trained doctors or surgeries or whatever it is. But Ella's comment there, the final comment, was get some perspective. So tell me, what's your perspective? GBviews at gbnews.uk, or tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBnews. I've got to say, that conversation is one that I'm sure all of us could have continued for quite some time, but I do have to move on to something else. So I'm going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I'll be talking about junk food. Do you think junk food should have the same kind of health warnings as what you're seeing on your screen there, which was the cigarette ones? Don't go away.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews at gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back. I can tell you lots of you are getting in contact about that last debate, and I'll read out some of your views in just a moment. But first, I want to just move the story on, the conversation on, if I may, because junk food, that has been in the news again today. Don't mind admitting I'm a bit partial to it myself, but the conversation is all around, should we have basic kind of health warnings similar to cigarettes? You know, the warnings that you see with the old kind of mangled organs and stuff like that on the cigarette packets. Researchers are saying that ultra-processed foods are the new tobacco. This research comes after the NHS had over 11,000 hospital admissions directly attributed to obesity. So what do you reckon? Should we be treating things like sugary snacks and fizzy drinks no differently to how we label cigarettes? Nabila?
Yes, I think, there was a time when warning labels on cigarette packs would have seemed inconceivable, and now we have the most terrifying images on packets, and it's almost incredible that anybody smokes at all, given the warnings. But society is changing, and it's changing very rapidly, and with the health crisis like the coronavirus pandemic, for example, which is threatening us all, I think prevention of disease is just as important as cure these days, and we live in an age where we are lucky to be one of the best informed generations, and we can look up information almost instantly. And I think the warnings are actually responding to a demand for knowledge from customers, and checking labels and ingredients is something that we should all be entitled to. So I'm not too sure about, the gory images aimed at us of buying a product, for example, but I think that health dangers should be highlighted sensibly.
Ella?
I disagree. I think that the thing that happened with cigarettes is, it's not just because I like the occasional cigarette and I hate those pictures, but the main reason why people gave up cigarettes recently was through the introduction of vaping. You saw a massive drop in people smoking rates in the introduction of vaping, because that was an easy way and a comfortable way and an enjoyable way for people to stop smoking and then eventually give up completely. There's not a huge amount of evidence that shows that simply looking at human beings are so kind of stupid and simple that simply looking at a nasty image makes us not want to do it. It doesn't quite work like that in relation to advertising. But more importantly, crisps, processed food, chocolate, stuff like that is not the same as smoking. It's not the same as alcohol. I think what we really should be doing is talking more. I think we've for too long played down the importance of agency, of people's ability to make decisions. Maybe have one cigarette a week, maybe have a couple of chocolate bars a week. So if people want to eat loads and get fat, that's their position, that's their choice. I mean, Michelle, you started the programme by talking about the fact that it's your choice whether or not you get vaccinated, and that you won't give that information out to anyone. That's a very strong defence of your moral agency that I very much agree with, and I think it applies here too. People should, if you live in a free country, you should be able to access things freely without feeling, the term nanny state gets thrown around a lot by a lot of different people. But I think this really feels like government breathing down people's necks when it either doesn't work, and also it's, it annoys people. I think that's quite a serious.
Michael's itching to
it's not going to be very pleasant going around the supermarkets with all these horrific images, is it? I mean, look, I think this is a nanny state stuff. I think it's way over the top, and I don't think it's very positive. I think we need to be realistic. We are, as a society, the Western world, we have got serious health problems with obesity and things like that, and especially if we go into an economy where more and more people are going to be sat in their front rooms or in their bedrooms working from home all the time. And something I certainly think would be much more positive. I go and smash the gym, generally within reason. I can eat what I want, and if you exercise regularly, that helps. I would like to see a real push to encourage kids, maybe put it in the curriculum, to start introducing children going to the gym and exercising so they're more familiar with gyms. I think that'd be a very positive thing to do, instead of putting horrific images on food labels. Let's get Britain fitter and recognise that physical fitness as well as mental health is incredibly important. And then you can have loads of kebabs.
I think what we're talking about as well is the freedom to access that kind of information, that, we make up our minds in the end. You can eat yourself to your ill health, but what is at stake here is to have access to information, basically guidance that tells you that's wrong for you, effectively. And I think, what's clear, I mean, we have great evidence that junk food is far more of a threat than any perceived dangers from a COVID jab, for example. So I think we should put things into perspective, because it effectively affects the health of the nation. We're not talking about coercive measures, but guidance for people to lead a better and healthier life.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is there's this sort of, I think there's this idea that people don't realise that eating 5 packets of crisps a day is going to make you obese. People do realise that. The question is, why are they doing it? And I think it's not that there's this sort of, it tends to take a quite anti-working class line a lot of the time, which is that there is this massive fat public out there who just are so thick that they keep eating fast food and they don't realise it. And what we need to do as a very educated state is put information on and labels to kind of tell them off and make sure that they make the right choices. I mean, I don't know about people, getting people to smash the gym. I think gyms are dystopian places where you run for no reason. But I think that
you run to stay healthy.
Yeah, but what about opening up more public playgrounds? What about opening up, having more communal sports, having things that are enjoyable for people? If you probably,
it's enjoyable.
You really,
Try it.
I have tried the gym. I think it's an awful place. I like doing the legs, bumps and tums with a whole bunch of other women. Doing things like that, having more resources for society rather than trying to narrow people's choices. I think the government is always, whether it's in relation to coronavirus or this, it wants to narrow people's choices. Why not open them up?
Well, I know you're desperate to come back and tell me again about the gym.
But recommend it, yeah.
I know he does. He recommends the gym, but
much better.
Yeah, I do have to. Well, I don't have to, but I want to move on because I just want to squeeze a little something in before we finish that made me smile. It's all about the Secret Santa at the moment, isn't it? What would be your gift if you had a Secret Santa? I've got to say, we do Secret Santa in my own family. There's so many of us, it costs a fortune, so we just do a Secret Santa. I think we're a bit tight. But what would you consider? Maybe a chocolate, a selection box, something funny, or I don't know what. The children's charity, Bernardo's, have released images of some of their most absurd donations this year. The reason I'm linking this to Secret Santa is because apparently when it comes to Secret Santa, that's what a lot of people are doing, making donations to a charity. Staff have received donations including a scorpion preserved in a jar of formaldehyde, which has actually since been given to the local university. They've got a farmer's lamb castrating tool. What? This is some of their top donations. In Glasgow, a handbag was donated with a set of false teeth inside. Staff apparently were really chuffed with this jacket donation until they found some leftover Domino pizza in the pocket. A local Bernardo's in Wales was sent this used toilet brush. Who would do that? And another of their favourites this year was a donation by a man named Jeff. And how do we know his name? Well, accompanied with his donation of his underwear was a poem. It says this: wear these at your leisure, wear with pride and pleasure, and keep them safe to treasure, with a lovely kiss at the end. Honestly, I always maintain this. I think there are some absolute weirdos out there in this society. If you was doing donations to charities, would you donate any of the above toilet brushes? Who does that?
No, I need my toilet brush, unfortunately, so I won't be giving that away this Christmas. I mean, I've had some pretty appalling presents over the years. So some very good ones as well, I should point out. But no, certainly I hope Santa doesn't leave any of those under my Christmas tree.
But who would even give underwear to... I wouldn't give my used underwear.
No, I don't think most people wouldn't, but you do that thing where you clear out the cupboard of all the stuff you're going to throw out and then you do just chuck it in a bag, and I have to make myself consciously pick out all the stuff that doesn't have holes in it. I don't quite go down the used knickers line, but anything that doesn't have holes in it, but sometimes you might throw something by accident
I guess it's also the kind of stuff that probably meant a lot to someone at some point before it became obsolete. I think the real danger is when some people might drop off shells or something.
Well, I think check your pockets. False teeth and bits of pizza. How gross. Anyway, of course, so I do obviously advocate donating to charity, just not the weird stuff like your teeth and your pants. Keep them to yourself, quite frankly.
You do need them.
Anyway, what, your teeth? And your pants.
And your pants.
Well, you probably
They're
need
recommended,
both of them.
aren't they?
Keep hold of your smalls and your teeth. Anyway, that's pretty much all we've got time for. Panel, thank you very much for your time and for your company. Thank you as well to you at home for your company. We've really enjoyed it tonight. And I will be back tomorrow, exactly the same time, 6 o'clock till 7 o'clock. Have a great evening, and I'll see you then.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. A lot of cloud around for this coming night. As a result of this, a little bit less cold than it's been recently, particularly in the south. There is some rain around, and the air's still cold enough, though, for some ice across Scotland as this rain mingles with colder air here. Some snow, too, for the mountains of northern Scotland. Elsewhere, though, any early evening rain should soon clear away to leave a lot of cloud around. 1 or 2 clear spells for central and eastern England, but good deal of cloudy grey weather to start Thursday morning, and after an early dip in temperatures across the east, well, those temperatures generally coming up from the west, so not as cold, particularly in the south, compared to last night. So it will be a fairly grey start to Thursday morning. Still some rain across parts of Scotland. This will tend to fizzle out for a time before being boosted by the next weather front coming in from the southwest. So quite a wet day to come for Scotland. Some rain too for Northern Ireland and for Northern England, but rain elsewhere across England and Wales, not really amounting to too much. And as the rain clears, we see some milder air coming into the southwest. So temperatures here, 11, 12, 13 degrees on Thursday afternoon. Still on the chilly side, though, in and to the north of this rain band. And the air certainly cold enough for across Scotland on Thursday night into Christmas Eve morning for some quite significant snowfall across the mountains, so something to bear in mind if you're travelling here. Elsewhere, though, into Christmas Eve morning, the rain will clear through. We're left with clear spells, but a lot of damp ground, so potentially some fog patches forming, but it won't be as cold for most of us as it has been for some recent nights. So Christmas Eve could start quite grey, quite foggy across central southern England. The fog here will take its time to clear on Christmas Eve morning. So again, bear that in mind if you have Christmas travel plans. But the fog will lift from the west as this next band of rain comes in from the west. Some quite heavy rain for parts of southwest England, Wales into Northern Ireland. A drier day for Scotland. Scotland still in the colder air ahead of this weather front, and this sets the scene then as we move into Christmas Day. We've got cold air to the north and east of the UK, milder air trying to push into the south. Where these weather fronts separate the dividing line, well, that's where we've got the greatest chance of seeing snow. So quite an unsettled picture, so certainly some rain around at times, with some quite low temperatures in the north. Here we've got the chance of some snow too.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We